Hello, and welcome to another episode of my Singularity Let's Play. This is Northstar. I hope you folks are well, taking care of each other, and being kind to yourselves. It's an Unfold in the Universe thing. I didn't quite get all the badges, or make it top 250 and expect the 250. Here's the mass extinction events. Exploration. Sorry, get the mic positioned a little better. So I'm trudging along here. I'm suffering from severe post-exertional malaise from a rather difficult day yesterday, which tends to leave me irritable and depressed. I'm a little perked up because of an unexpected act of kindness from someone where I'm living, but sorry. And because I did hear from a liaison in my congressperson's office today, who seems confident that at least I can be processed for a priority list on housing assistance program fairly quickly, and about exactly as of that message, I think I counted off in exactly 7 more weeks at the latest till I'd hear if I made a priority list for it. That's great, although that doesn't mean just be on the list doesn't mean I get something quickly, and that's only to hear back if I make it. They can still make all sorts of excuses. The people are deciding to not put me on that priority list, and even if they do, the optimism of someone like this liaison isn't always justified. I see this from a lot of people in positions of small power bureaucrats who are not of the type who are trying to screw people over, or people who are like social workers or liaisons in Congress offices. There's a certain optimism where people think the system works, and it doesn't. I worked as an EMT. I've seen how it fails people again and again. I worked with the homeless in that job. I volunteered at homeless shelters. Of course, a lot of them actually did have a housing assistance thing at one point and got kicked out, which sometimes it was because they had mental health issues and misbehaved. Sometimes it was because they fell behind the rent, because even in housing assistance, you still have rent to pay. Which, if you are on SSI or SSDI, isn't hard at all, because it's usually very low rent, but still, if you're disabled and you get screwed out of those programs, it can still put you in an impossible situation where you can't work and you have rent. If you don't make it, you get kicked out of those programs and pretty much never get in them again. So fails the mentally ill because it doesn't make considerations for their erratic behavior, kicks them out of these housing things, and then never lets them on again, or puts them on the really, really, really long wait lists that take forever from the match. And that's if they're lucky enough to get something, which usually means they're on a priority list, because if without being on a priority list, you pretty much never get matched, period. But they're often excluded from the programs or excluded from the priority lists ever again after they've been gotten something once. And it can be, I've heard some of them allege fraud by the managers of some of these housing buildings, either private housing that's subsidized by the government, that's Section 8, or public housing, which I can believe because there's a lot of corruption in the system, and some landlords, some slumlords are deeply corrupt. Honestly, I've usually seen higher priced places or middle of the road places, like where I'm staying right now would count as middle of the road. But I've lived in slums in the past, and when I've lived in slums, by contrast, the landlords often at slums will suck. So, like dangerous inner city type places I'm talking about. Some people say you get what you pay for. I mean, I may object to the rent where I am now, but at least there's not the scumminess of like of those slums I've lived where you can't trust the landlords in slums. But but I can't afford to stay where I am forever. So eventually I'll have to end up in a place like, yeah. But anyways, but even without any kind of fraud, because some of the people are honest, there's the issue of making rent. I did find out why. Part of why my Social Security is being slowed down like heck, and it's because the case was still being handled. The congressional people were able to find this very quickly, even though I was hitting roadblocks and not being given any information. This is something I should have been told ages ago, but the case is still being handled by the office in a previous area where I lived, even though I moved. A place where the office was known to be really hostile to people and fuck with them. It's partly kind of, I hate to say this, but a reverse racism thing, where most people worked at the office were minority, and a lot of the people needing help in the area, because there was a city with a lot of minorities, but then also white suburbs within the area, and so the white people, they would tend to be hostile to and try and start their Social Security cases. I mean, this is well-known, open secret among the population area, so it's not... But I moved, and my case shouldn't have still been held by the office, but they were still holding it and probably fucking with it, even though I had moved and tried to update my address already and been warned there's multiple places in the system with your address, so it might not stick. And especially if someone at that other office was trying to keep my thing from proceeding, they might have overridden the address change or something. So, but yeah, the liaison at my congressperson's office, she's gonna try and get the address updated, which should transfer to the Social Security office right now, which is actually known to be good. And which is unusual for Social Security offices, and then hopefully things can move along at a reasonable pace. Though, still have to deal with the for-profit agency that disability stuff is contracted out to. The office may be good, but the for-profit company not. Yeah, because privatization of what should be government services is bullshit. And it always ends up leading to lower quality service and profits that are diverted to the pockets of billionaires ultimately, because who owns corporations who owns the majority of equity in corporations is usually very, very rich people. Ordinary people may own a few shares in the stock market, but they proportionally own very little at the stock market. People, I have 100,000 in the stock market. You don't realize how many millions and millions and millions of dollars the billionaires have in the stock market. Hundreds of millions, billions of dollars of equity that the very, very rich own. Because people think they're winning from the system. No, they're not. They're getting cheated out of more value that's being extracted from various ways with monopolies and great system against labor and trade unions being crushed and these things. They'll be cheating out of a lot more value than they're obtaining from the stock market, unless you're part of that very elite class of people who have hundreds of millions in the stock market. It's like on what you're having maybe 50,000 a year taken away from you. You may not realize it. Like, all right, let's say you're middle class and you have a salary job and you're getting paid 100,000. I guarantee the value of your work to employer is 150,000 or more. The nationwide average is workers get 45% of the value they produce in the United States, which is much higher than many countries in the world. Like in the third world. Anyways, Europe has higher proportions than 45%, but it's higher in the third world for sure. But salaried workers in the upper middle class tend to get a higher proportion, so they might make 2/3 or 3/4 the value. they produce. So I don't know. Let's even say 3/4. Let's say someone gets paid $120,000. They produce $150,000 for the employer. So $30,000 the employer is siphoning off from them. Not bad. However, they think this is at least not bad compared to how others are getting screwed. Like retail workers and factory workers at the bottom might be getting paid only 1/4 of what they produce. The lower class gets exploited more heavily than the middle class. And then that person, upper middle class, maybe they have 200,000 stocks, and the system of exploitation and equity and stock market dividends ends up siphoning an extra 10,000, 12,000 a year to them, more than they would in a more fair system. They think they're coming out ahead, but they're not, because they're losing 30,000 on one hand and only getting 10 or 12 back on the other. And those are some of the most privileged members of the working class, the class of people who actually work for a living. In the US, working class is too often taken to mean lower class, but salaried, office workers are still working class. They still work for a living and could not survive off of their assets alone. So they're still working class. The way people aren't working class are people who are either could get all their living off of, or get nearly all their living off of capital assets owned, like the billionaires, who vast majority of their income comes from owned assets, from returns on investment and such, or a very large percentage of substantial, even though it's a minority. So people get like 1/4 of their living, and that's what's known in Marxist terms as the petite bourgeois, the people, like 3/4 of their income still comes from their own labor, but 1/4 comes from exploiting people who work for them. That's someone who's known, that would be considered petite bourgeois. That's small business owners, though many small business owners, it's a much smaller percentages, like they get 85% of their value. Like if you're talking like a small shop owner, because retail has very slim margins. Retail workers are actually less exploited than most lower class workers. I shouldn't have said retail workers before factory owners. Factory workers are a great example of someone who might produce 5-6 times the value they're paid. Retail is just such a low value job that a lot of retail jobs you're getting paid 9% of the value you produce. And that's at minimum wage. Of course, keep in mind, that's what prices set very low to compete. And when you say raise the minimum wage in an area, prices go up, and you're still getting paid 9% of the value you produce, but now you're getting paid more because, prices went up and the revenue went up for the retail shops. Also, their expenses went up. They might even make less profit than before, but in fact, the exploitation ratio is usually better when you raise the minimum wage. Depending, I'm talking ordinary retail. I'm not talking like luxury retail. Like if it's a jewelry store or something, workers at a jewelry store are probably getting paid less than 1/3 of the value they produce. It's different. Luxury goods have very much wider margins, but we're talking like you work at a CVS or a grocery store or something. The margins are very slim on that kind of lower and middle class retail. Luxury goods have huge margins by contrast. So if you sell stuff to the rich, that's what I'm saying by luxury goods. Like someone who sells luxury car salesman, and then employs, workers at the front desk of that luxury car dealership, whatever, those people are getting heavily exploited usually. Anyways, or was I exploitation? But there's a fundamental optimism. That's where I was. There's a fundamental optimism so these, like, more helpful government and nonprofit sorts, as opposed to the ones who are there to be a fig leaf and pretend to be there to help and actually screw people, because you find both kinds in like government and nonprofit. I don't mean to paint with a broad brush when I say they're all like that. There's a lot of them are like that, and there's a lot who aren't. I'd say 60-70% are there to screw people, but a good third are still there to help people. And you can really tell a difference if you know how to, like, spot signs of one or the other, or someone's attitude. Often the people who are really hostile tend to be of the screw people, but not always. Even people who want to help can have a bad day. Absolutes are rarely ever true. But anyways, this person may not be optimistic, but if I get a priority waitlist in 7 weeks, and then it takes 4 months to get off the priority waitlist, because some of the priority waitlists can have much shorter times. It might be over a decade for a normal waitlist, but priority one might have 5 to 7 months. So before I'd run out of money and become homeless, I'd still have to pay rent. And if my Social Security gets blocked by these bastards at the other office who are not letting the address update and who are obstructing my case, even though they shouldn't have responsibility over it, it's supposed to be transferred to the office where I live now. If they can delay it long enough, and it's a slow process, even if it's in the right hands, if I have no income, then I could end up in a Section 8 public housing kind of thing and not even be able to make the rent there because too sick to work any substantial number of hours. And no employer wants to hire me because as a disabled person, I'm less productive than a healthy person. They may still be able to profit off me. They still may be able to have me do work and pay me less than what I produce for them, but the amount of profit they get off me is less than a healthy person who's going to be more productive. They're not going to hire me because they have healthy people who they can hire and make more profit off of. And, greed. So unless they get someone who's feeling generous, they're not going to hire me and make the necessary disability accommodations, which are going to mean I'm less profitable than a healthy worker. And I would only be able to work a very limited number of hours due to the post-exertion malaise I get. I'm loopy, I'm tired, and for half the day I could barely, my legs hurt so much I felt unsteady on my feet today after traveling yesterday. That's the kind of thing that happens if I overexert myself. I don't feel up to doing a video of something much more difficult than this, or maybe Pop-Up Dungeon like I do a Stellaris Let's Play. Don't have the energy for that today, I might try. I could try it, but I would make so many mistakes because I can't focus, can't think clearly today. Because the post-exertion malaise. Yeah, I'm kind of a mess right now. I shouldn't have done that, actually. That was not worth the Darwinium. But anyways, with the help of this congressperson's office, there is a chance things could work out. Probably not without. Should reach out to them sooner. Especially when I moved and I heard about the congressperson's office in the area I moved to was much more helpful than the one in the area I left, which I worked with that office before on a problem. They seem pretty helpful. So better than good is really good, I guess. Of course, they deal with some people who are obstinate and sneaky and can't always get good outcome even when they are really trying. So we'll see. But yeah, part of the hostility and the actual reverse racism, it's not out of the blue. It's driven by Trump's deportations and such. Some people take it personally and take it out on anyone who's part of the privileged class, or they perceive people first look at me, they assume I'm a Republican or something, which I'm absolutely not. But I dress conservatively, the way I carry myself, I just seem socially conservative at first appearance. It's not even true. But people think it on initial impressions, and even hearing the way I talk, I'm very educated, I went to very good schools, and they assume that I'm one of those rich Republican types. And so, yeah, I can understand that someone at that office may be trying to take out stuff on me assuming, like even when I talked to the state attorney general, the person initially assumed I was like some conservative when I was talking about someone being obstinate and difficult. And it's like, no, and this person's broken to speak another language. I have no problem with people speaking another language. They did it intentionally so they could drop the call, pretending that they got connected to someone who didn't speak their language. It was like it was a ploy. I have no problem with people being bilingual or mainly fluent in a given language. It's a little complicated. Well, first I got someone who anyways, this was dealing with something with someone at the for-profit agency was talking about the deals with disability stuff, who was just broke into speaking another language in the middle of a conversation had been in English so that they had an excuse to hang up. Like pretending they couldn't understand me when they clearly would have to be bilingual for the job, just so they could avoid giving me the name of the caseworker who had been reassigned. I think they, because they had rejected me based on missing form, they provided the missing forms, didn't appeal, so I should have been reassigned to a different person. But the person who had it before, they're not allowed to reassign the same person, actually, was like hostile and obstructing me, and I think they're delaying even reassigning me, and when I doubt they even actually have someone assigned. And they're supposedly dealing with like budget cuts related to Trump stuff, which throws them into further chaos and lets people get away with shittiness they normally couldn't when things are orderly and normal. So yeah, people want to burn the system down when they see people like them getting hurt by assholes like Trump. I don't blame them for feeling the way they do, but I'm not the person I'm on their side. I'm socialist. I lie to the left of the Democrats. Democratic socialist. I'm not a Marxist-Leninist. I really, really, really get pissed off with these MLs who go around pretending that everyone who's a socialist should be a Marxist-Leninist, and anything that doesn't agree with my version of things is revisionism. No, Marxist-Leninism failed. The Soviet Union collapsed, and it didn't collapse because it didn't succeed economically, because actually their economic growth rate was better than the West. They didn't fail because they were militarily outmatched. They actually were growing in relative military strength compared to the US. Even as the US was developing, the Soviet military was becoming higher and higher tech over time. They collapsed because they could not maintain political stability, because their one-party system was too vulnerable to the very groups that they hate on, revisionists, getting into positions of power, people like Gorbachev, who tore the Soviet Union apart. And so the Marxist-Leninists need to shut the hell up sometimes and learn from history. Marx was not wrong. Lenin was. There's other ways to do Marxism other than Lenin's specific theories, and Lenin had some good insights. I'm not saying he was wrong about everything, but his overall take was wrong. The idea of forming, basically, merging all socialists into a single party that leads to one-party state, that leads to long-term political instability. You need competition in political parties. We're not talking like some capitalist competition. We're talking debate, infighting sometimes even, opposition politics. These things are necessary for the health of a society, because otherwise you will get bad leadership eventually. If there's an opposition and they're empowered to resist the people in power, they can cause problems for good leaders, but they also can stop bad leaders from carrying too much power. In fact, part of the reason the US has collapsed into fascism now is because the country has become more and more where the opposition can't do anything to oppose the party in power. And this is the fault of both the Democrats and the Republicans. Obama did things that increased presidential authority just as much, and Clinton just as much as did Reagan and Bush. Well, maybe not as much, but Reagan and Bush did worse, but they both moved the ball in the same direction, is the point. They both increased presidential authority, and now we have Trump, and the presidential authority is so great that it's hard to stop anything he's doing. Hard to stop him from destabilizing the system. He was successfully contained in his first term, but he is not being successfully contained in the second. And so the system is probably going to collapse. It's quite likely he'll try and run for a third term, which is blatantly unconstitutional, and that will tear the United States apart and it will cease to exist as a country anymore. And by which I mean I suspect states will try and succeed and stuff if he tries to force his way and manages to successfully force his way into running a third time and wins. At that point, like, it's blatantly unconstitutional, and you'll see states try to leave the union, and that'll lead to violence, insurgency. It's not, I don't condone it. I'm saying this is what I suspect will happen, to be clear. YouTube censors. This is a prediction of where trends will lead. To any rational person who looks at that, if they accept the premise that Trump will try and do his third term nonsense, is forced to conclude that the country will not survive it. The Supreme Court won't stop him because he's loaded with his own friends, Heritage Foundation picks, kind of assholes, Federalist Society, all that. The Supreme Court won't stop him. The legislature doesn't have the power to stop him. If he does that, bye-bye United States. And he will try and do that if he doesn't drop dead of a heart attack or a stroke or aggressive case of cancer or something. But that's unlikely since presidents get the best healthcare in the world. I was talking about how JFK had Addison's disease, something that was covered up, but it's a documented fact. This is a disease that leads to adrenal insufficiency, which leads to shortages of aldosterone and cortisol, and how that is similar in some ways to, it appears people with long COVID have low cortisol levels. But it's been proven very hard to get tests of cortisol supplementation from people with long COVID, even though JFK was easily able to get the cortisol he needed for Addison's disease because he was rich and then he was a president. He was from a very wealthy family, so he could get the best health care. And then he was president, so he could get the very best health care. Meanwhile, it's proven hard for people to get. There are ways legally when there's no treatment or cure for disease, as is the case of long COVID, doctors to try things that are not FDA approved. They just have to fill out a bunch of extra paperwork, so they don't want to do it unless you're rich and can, if you're have a concierge physician and you're rich, they have the time to do something like that, and people expect them to go the extra mile when they're paying that much. So rich people get better health care. That shouldn't surprise people. Of course, I was optimistic about learning about them identifying the cortisol deficiency in people with long COVID. It was shown in rats, which this is another interesting thing. There's been a struggle to create a model system for long COVID. Those who have no familiarity with biology, the reason people do so much research on mice and rats is because you can create diseases in the mice and rats that mirror how diseases work in humans, and by studying the mice and rats, you can do invasive things you would never want to do in humans, like vivisection, where you cut open a live mouse. I've seen this in research I've done. I've actually stood right next to a grad student when I was an undergrad and watched mice vivisections. It was necessary for the research in certain cases. And others, I'm like, why can't you just euthanize this thing first? It doesn't need to be alive. Oh, well, the organs start decaying. We're not going to be here that long. Sometimes necessary, sometimes it's just laziness, but from people who don't care about animal welfare. But there really should be better. When you design research studies, there's actually a lot of oversight, but sometimes things that happen in not to generate data that's going to the publication, but to generate background research, which isn't subject to the same oversight as the experimental design of what's actually going to be used for a publication. But yeah, you can do things to mice and rats you would never do to a human being, and you can get a much greater understanding of diseases that affect humans by studying mice and rats. You dumbass Republicans are like, we're wasting money giving cancer to rats. It's like, we're giving cancer to rats so that we can find a cure for cancer in humans, dumbasses. I'm sorry, but you have to be really aggressively ignorant to think that. I mean, these are like, usually they're evangelical Christian religious types who don't have any understanding of biology and don't want to have any understanding of biology because they deny things like evolution. And so then they end up in government and they say dumb things like that. There's good reasons we study mice and rats. Of course, a lot of those people don't even understand the Bible correctly. They pervert it in ways that should never be perverted. I'm a Christian, and it offends me what some of these evangelicals do. They are some of the most unchristian people in the world, pretending to be Christians. They are the worst hypocrites, and they don't even understand the documents that they claim to be literalists about. It's incredibly obnoxious, and, you know, they're hypocrites in other ways, like people talking about charity and then living in mansions, and charity becomes give money to me, to the church, which just gets siphoned to them living in their mansions. It doesn't go to the poor, to people Jesus actually talked about helping. The poor, the homeless, the vulnerable, the sick, the crippled, which would be, you know, the disabled today, not to subsidize the luxury cars and mansions of a church leader, which is what some of these evangelical churches have. I lived with a roommate who personally was aware of one of these people in a community I lived. Like, he had delivered pizza to the guy's mansion. Talked about it. And I'd been at church some and had become disillusioned with it. It's like, yeah, that jibes with my read on these people. They're hypocrites. They're liars. But they're good at deception. I'm a very good judge of character, so I caught into it. But even me, it took like almost a couple years before I really got an understanding of what these people were really like. When that church seminar, I'm like realizing what utter hypocrites and pieces of shit the leaders were. I mean, I knew some of them were from the very beginning, but learning how widespread the rot was, that particular church. And then later, having that roommate who had, you know, and he had a story of the wife of one of the churches being, oh, it's the help, when he came to deliver pizza, like just being really super rude. He wasn't even an ordinary delivery guy. He was the manager of a pizza place. He was just taking over delivery for the day because they didn't have enough drivers. So, I had an interesting set of roommates around that time. I also had the son of a police chief as a roommate. I had a minister, the orphan of a dead minister, as a roommate who had a kid on the way. He was super, super guilty about that because, you know, he'd been like taught premarital sex is bad, and then he got a girl pregnant outside of wedlock. I think he was looking at doing a shotgun wedding. I had all sorts of different characters as roommates. I learned a lot about people and how they think and how they see the world in those years. This is when I was stuck in a rural area after finishing my master's degree. So there was a silver line to that time, even though it made it so that my skills were too stale and I wasn't able to get into pharmaceutical industry jobs. And I moved to where there were jobs in that field, and that was like what my skill set was towards, because first I was getting interviews, but when I passed the 3-year mark of time since I've been in a lab, I stopped getting interviews. Now I got a few before then, because 2 years, between 2 and 3, you can sometimes get interviews, but it's hard. After 3, it's impossible, is what it turned out to be. I mean, those are just arbitrary bullshit numbers, but the HR managers who do the hiring use arbitrary bullshit numbers to decide whether to throw out an application or take it seriously. This is maybe one tiny thing that the replacement of HR managers with AI might be good, because AIs aren't going to use arbitrary bullshit numbers necessarily. They're going to, if they're programmed at all well, going to correlate to actual statistics on past employee success and course, they're also gonna, some of them are gonna do inbuilt racism and shit, unfortunately, so that's not great. AIs can be used well in these sort of things, but they have to be programmed very carefully. Very carefully, and that does remind me of another thing, which is idiots who try and deny that technological unemployment is going to be a thing. I want just to ask these people, do you not think that if AIs can do the work, can allow work to be done by fewer people can do the same work with AIs being applied to the task, there's going to be less demand for labor at those companies. Like, they're going to have fewer employees because you can't just produce unlimited amounts of goods and services. There has to be a market for them. This is not the same as an industrial revolution because a lot of markets are close to saturation and because we are reaching the natural resource limits of the planet. You can't just produce more of many things because ultimately there's inputs to many industries. Even service industries have some material inputs. And this is why, like, the US does imperialism in Africa and stuff to get raw materials, because we are reaching the limits of the ability of the planet to produce more raw materials without completely destroying local environments. And we're also already over capacity of the planet in terms of overall biosphere disruption, habitat destruction, changes in land use, and global warming. Like, we are already beyond the limits of the Earth, and so you can't just, if AI allows 25% higher productivity, let's say, you're not going to be able to just produce 25% more goods and services. We are already within that range of the limits of what we can produce and sell, especially when we're in an era where increasing inequality means that a lot of markets are actually shrinking for certain goods. And that's only being compensated by trying to expand to overseas markets because domestic markets for certain things are shrinking. Or at least they're shrinking relative to the population in some cases. People's living standards are declining in the developed world, which is something a lot of people are in denial about. But just pointing to statistics like people's pay doesn't capture the full picture. You have to compare pay to prices, and pay has been actually pretty stagnant in the United States in terms of pay per hour. People are working longer and longer hours to try and keep up with rising prices, but that has limits. Which is to say, history doesn't just repeat itself. There are differences in context, and those differences can lead to different outcomes. It's a case of a little knowledge is dangerous. These people who reject the idea will have technological employment know just enough of history to know it didn't happen before, but not enough of history to know things are different this time. That history is not going to repeat itself because context is different. And one of the things that happened that cannot happen before is there was a massive increase in government employment and a growth of even corporate bureaucracy. The growth in bureaucracy made up for the loss of as much demand for actual manufacturing workers over time as machines allowed more and more factory workers to do less, and there was also a rise in living standards. You can't see the same rise in living standards because we're reaching the limits of the planet, so you can't see more consumption of goods. We can't have more bureaucracy because the amount of bureaucracy we have is already starting to have serious feedback effects that are harming things. Like, there's too much government bureaucracy. Some people point out it's true. We need ways to, in fact, do things with less bureaucracy, like universal basic income can cut back on welfare bureaucracy. We need more help for ordinary people, in regards to welfare. People are not getting enough help from the government, but we need to do it with fewer bureaucrats. Hence UBI. Or did I support? Unlike many MLs who are really just dipping into accelerationism, they don't want to support because it's a band-aid on a gaping flesh wound, which is true. But the band-aid is better than nothing. Capitalism will destroy itself, but a UBI will delay it a little bit, but it'll make it much more livable in the decline for a lot of people. People shouldn't be asked to die just so a bad system can end slightly sooner. The net human good is to have a slightly slower decline. And, of course, these same sorts are very stubborn about taking this opportunity. Well, support for Marxist ideals is very low. I mean, it may be growing, but the vast majority of the population is still capitalist. To perfect their ideas and revise them and improve them, because, again, the past ways of doing things failed. That doesn't mean socialism can't succeed, but it means you need to perfect it. It's a relatively new ideology, and there's still a lot of room for improvement. Whereas capitalism has had 600 years to perfect itself, and this is peak capitalism, what we're experiencing now. It doesn't get better than this. This is as good as capitalism gets, and it is increasingly getting worse. We've already passed the peak of what capitalism can achieve. And we're on the way down now. Socialism has not peaked. It is a relatively new ideology in the scheme of things. Whereas capitalism has had 600 years in power to a substantial degree, and the ideology of it essentially originated even earlier with like merchant republics like Venice being the early places where some of the ideology was really formed, even if it wasn't formalized. The ideas have been developing even longer than that 600 years. Socialism didn't really get any chance to even come to any kind of power until 1920s. The early 1920s, where the Soviet Union formed. 1922 officially, I think. That was when the end of the Russian Civil War. So it's had 103 years of actual chance to do any kind of be in power anywhere. In the modern world, the only country that's truly unequivocally socialist is Cuba. China has a kind of weird amalgamation of capitalism and socialism, even though they're looking at maybe going back to more pure socialism. Venezuela is stuck in gridlock trying to go socialist, but being politically obstructed by the right wing. And then people say it's failing because of socialism. No, they're not yet reached socialism. Never. We're not talking like, communism. No, Cuba is not socialist, period. Most of their economy is under private ownership still. The socialists, the first thing they did was nationalize the oil companies. So they took that first step towards socialism, and then they got blocked from doing much more, because then the right-wing political parties, because it is a multi-party democracy despite the propaganda, have obstructed anything else. With like the CIA going and covertly supporting those right-wing parties to prevent the country from actually becoming socialist. So China kind of abandoned full-fledged socialism in the 1970s. It's now a mix of capitalism and socialism. It may revert to being fully socialist, but it may not. North Korea has never really been socialism. It's been an unholy amalgamation of socialism and monarchy, which are two ideologies that do not mesh well. Like traditional Korean monarchical ways of rule were kind of, some of those institutions and attitudes were co-opted into Jurche, which is the ideology of North Korea. It's not Marxism, really. They say it is, but it isn't. So you have Cuba. That's socialist. And it's an island that's isolated by the U.S. It can't achieve its potential because of the U.S. saying anyone who trades with Cuba can't trade in the United States. Which means basically no one will trade with Cuba. Very, very few companies do. It's a type of unilateral sanction the U.S. does on them. And if the U.S. didn't sanction Cuba, if they just lifted all sanctions and let it be, stopped threatening to destabilize the country and just left it alone, it would succeed. But it can't really develop right now. So basically, from 1922 to the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was a 77-year period of socialism getting to try different things, and then it pretty much disappeared from the world. Compare that to capitalism's over 600 years to experiment. And although in the first 100 years, monarchies were trying to crush early capitalist countries, the same way that capitalist countries have been trying to crush socialist systems. Except the difference was they succeeded in 1989 with the collapse of the Soviet Union. They did not succeed against the early capitalist countries. That doesn't mean capitalism is better. The ability to compete effectively does not mean you're the better system. It just means maybe one system requires a little more favorable circumstances before it can really see its potential and become stable. Capitalism actually had a really rough first couple hundred years. From 1400, when you see the first capitalist, 1450 when you see the first capitalist systems emerge, so it's a little less than 600 years, 575, to 1650, capitalism had a really rough time, where there were only a few countries that had it in a real sense, like the Netherlands, and they were constantly getting invaded by countries that were old monarchist systems like Spain and France, until France eventually became capitalist. Yeah, the Dutch got their shit kicked in pretty bad a few times. And that was the first 200 years of capitalism. And then people say, oh, socialism hasn't done too well in its first 100 years. We'll give it another 100 without capitalism preventing more socialist systems from forming in the first place, and see how it does, because it took capitalism 200 years to even get past barely clinging to life in a few pockets of the planet. And that was a much less globalized world where you couldn't see. China had no ability to, say, project power into the Netherlands and crush the early capitalist systems that were there. China was, of course, a very traditional monarchist system in 14 whatever. Nowadays, the United States can project power all the way to China to try and crush them if they start nationalizing the special economic zones in their coast and getting rid of the capitalist elements and going back to full socialism. That's a danger. They may not succeed in trying, but they can try, because it's possible for one country to project power all around the world, which means any change in the system is going to take longer and it's going to be more difficult than it was back in the 1400s, when nations had the advantage that some of them were insular, were isolated. The Netherlands actually was protected by bodies of water they were able to use to flood their famous dikes, the Dutch dikes that were used to flood the area around their capital. When the Spanish attacked multiple times, they would rupture these dams and basically let the ocean come in and drown the Spanish armies, and that's how they were able to survive until their capitalist system was well enough to develop they could really fight on more even ground. The Soviet Union had no such geographical advantage. It was in a world where stuff like strategic bombers from the United States by the 1950s could fly all across the globe and drop nukes on them. We live in a globalized world, so radical shifts in ideology are much harder now than they were back then. Can't see little systems first get their feet under them and then expand. It doesn't work that way anymore. It's kind of an all or nothing world now. Which means that capitalism will cling to life even when it's desperately sick, until it collapses pretty much everywhere. That's going to take a long time. Which is why I say socialists have plenty of time to perfect their ideology. They're not going to come to power anytime soon, no matter how much they think the collapse is right around the corner. It's not. Individual countries will collapse, but there'll be restorations, just like happened with the slow fall monarchy, where sometimes a monarchy collapse, like France, the French Revolution, and then the more liberal capitalist democracy that formed was eventually crushed by, a coalition of nations, including Russia and Germany, which are very old school monarchies at the time. Germany hadn't yet started dabbling into capitalism, and forced back to a traditional system. Of course, that only lasted about 30 years till France went right back towards liberal capitalist regime again, starting in the 1840s. So, 1812, 36 years, and then they were already starting to drift back to how they've been before. So it didn't stick. But, yeah. Of course, Napoleon set in place a lot of laws across Europe that paved the way for capitalist development. The Napoleonic codes, legal systems which got rid of a lot of the old feudal privileges that had been propping up the monarchist systems, and thus paved the way for capitalism. Some people's never forgiven Napoleon for that. There are elements in the Catholic Church, for instance, who still hate him, consider him this great, terrible person because they think the world was better off under feudalism, honestly. Not many, but there are a few holdouts here and there. I've occasionally run into these people. They're very rare, but they exist. Monarchists haven't completely died out. They're just super rare now. Give it another couple more generations and there won't be any monarchists left on Earth, though. That's how ideologies die, when they're not intentionally crushed the way socialism was, slowly, with a lot of holdouts. But anyhow, so yeah, I don't know if I'll be able to get through Social Security, get through bureaucrats in my old town that are trying to hold on to my file when they're supposed to give it up, get around delays, and get to a situation where I'm both living somewhere where I can afford rent on Social Security and be able to get Social Security before I end up street homeless, because once that happens, it becomes terribly stressful, and with the impaired cortisol production in long COVID, the body has very poor time adapting to physical and mental stress, and I'll basically have a heart attack and die from things that wouldn't kill a normal human being who's not sick with long COVID. You can't expect someone with long COVID to survive on the streets the way a healthy person might be able to for a little while. And by on the streets, I mean on a mix of shelters and often people nights where they end up sleeping on park benches and stuff. It's not always actually streets, but shelters are dangerous, stressful places. I know I've helped at homeless shelters before. I was trying to become a physician. Volunteering at homeless shelters is one of the things a lot of pre-meds do. It's a very stressful environment where people get attacked, assaulted all the time, where stuff gets stolen all the time. Not safe. That's why some of the homeless go out and sleep on park benches, even when they can get in a shelter for the night, which they can't always, because there are more people who need the shelters than there are beds in the shelters usually. So, if they want to, they can't always get a bed, and they often don't want to because the shelters are super dangerous places. If you want to help homeless people, you need to get them housing. Stable, secure, real housing first. And you need to prevent people from becoming homeless, especially people no fault of their own. Long COVID is not my fault. I got it from a roommate who refused to obey proper quarantine rules, and when he started getting sick and knew it was COVID, to quarantine in place instead of drive all the way back from a business trip across state lines, come back to the apartment and not tell me for hours that he had lost his sense of smell, and thought he maybe was coming down with COVID. You should have quarantined in place, dumbass. Then you wouldn't have ruined my life. I mean, and he may have ultimately signed my death warrant because I might end up homeless and dying due to this idiot who, he could have killed me if I just gotten a red bad case in COVID and died on a ventilator too, so. Idiot who didn't take the virus seriously. He was a nice guy in most other ways, but he ruined my life. because of his stupidity about viruses. His arrogance. He was an entrepreneur, worker at a small business startup, like a partner in a small business startup, and he thought he was the shit. A lot of people like that do. I dated a girl who was an entrepreneur in a small business startup, and she just made $1 million, and she thought she was God, basically. And it didn't actually end up not working out because of that. Although I didn't like her arrogance. At least she was a genuinely nice person. It didn't work out because of some miscommunication, because she was not a good communicator. And neither was I, honestly. And she took me to an escape room thing, and we were supposed to roleplay something, and she didn't understand that I was playing the role I was supposed to do. The scenario they gave us is like, this is your lover, they've been abducted and something, and I don't know, I played the role too well. She clearly had no background in theater, and I did. And she thought I take it, like, was acting like we're already dating. It's like, no, I was literally just playing the role. Like, I couldn't get that across to her. Like, I know that we don't know each other super well. I don't know. Thought she was smart enough she'd understand that, and she seemed to be really serious about escape rooms, so I thought. This was also the most expensive date I've ever been on in my life. I didn't pay for it. This I'm like, I can afford that. I mean, I didn't say that. I was thinking this girl's just an escape room, and then she said she was going to pay for it. Don't worry about the cost. And it turned out she paid like $3,000 for a date, for what was only her second date. It's like, what the fuck? I guess when you're swimming in money nowadays, that could pay more than 2 months' rent for me. Like 2.5 months of rent for that amount of money. She paid that just for like a couple hours trying to do what was an escape room designed for 6 people, and it was just the 2 of us. So normally it would have cost $500 a person or something, or sometimes larger groups would do it. You could have up to 9, I think, but it was designed for 6. If you had 9 people, I think the cost would have been like 3 something. Still expensive. She rented out just the 2 of us, and they charged like an extra private party fee or something for inconveniencing it, and so it was like $3,000 a person. Or no, $3,000 total. So $1,500 a person she paid for that. I'm like, oh, when I found out how much, I'm like, holy shit. We were kidding about the just made $1 million thing. But yeah. I don't know. But despite that, a nice person. She seemed to genuinely care about like issues like the homeless, which I was in no danger of becoming in myself, but it was an issue that I was passionate about even then. She cared about inequality and stuff, even if, I mean, I didn't see her giving all our money away to charity or something, but, you know. She was kind and personal in our actions, and the first date, she was all over me, which, I mean, I'm a kind of clueless guy, so I don't know if a woman is interested in me or not, so that helped. Yes, it was pretty freaking clear that she was quite into me, which is surprising. I don't know, first date went pretty well. There was a time I was sitting, I remember that end just, it's kind of late. I met at a bar, and like, not like that's how we met, but like we went to a bar for the first date. We arranged ahead of time. Did some dancing, and I just remember sitting there like at a subway stop because I wanted to make sure she got home safe, and she was drinking a little aggressively. Probably some pre-alcohols and stuff. Or maybe she was just, I don't know, nervous on first dates, I don't know. So just sitting with her, or leaning her head on my shoulder, or like just making sure, you know, waited till her subway came, and then tried to catch my own one, and missed it by like a minute, and had to Uber back at like, that was the last subway of the night, so it was late. I mean, I was glad I just had a really good first day, even if wish she had drank a little less. Because, I mean, later she didn't quite fully remember, like, you know, this last part. She didn't remember my sitting with her to make sure she got home safe. And, well, you know, I didn't go all the way, like, back home with her. I just made sure she got on her subway. She lived very close to the other end of the line. So, like, you know, but subways can be confusing for a drunk person, so. You know, and I thought I had the time. I thought I could then sprint over to my subway. This is when I was healthy, so, like, sprinting was no problem for me back then. But I, like, accidentally went down the wrong side of the subway because I was a tiny bit tipsy myself, not nearly drunk. I always, my whole life, have drank very little or not at all. Social drinker or not drinker at all. Especially since I got long COVID, I have a glass of wine at Christmas and that's it. I drink even less than I used to now, but I was a tiny bit tipsy and I went down the wrong side of the subway, like, you know, then I had to, like, oh shoot, the subway's coming on the other side, and sprint over there, and I missed it. They, like, doors are closing as I got there, and, like, I tried banging on it. The drive operator didn't wait a second to let me in, and that was the last subway of the night to get me home, so I had to Uber. It's quite expensive. I think I paid like $30 for the Uber ride or something, which is way more than it usually is, but because it was so late, and they take advantage of drunk people out late, or not drunk, but in my case, slightly tipsy. Take advantage of people when out late is the point, by charging way more for Ubers, and I mean, the drivers need the money, but I think it's actually the company that's taking most of it, not the drivers. Uber really screws over the drivers. But yeah, good memories, sort of. Just wish that escape room meant the girl got the wrong idea and from role playing, and then I was just doing normal things like asking about her, like, you know, life, like, do you have siblings? Are you close to their parents? What are your hobbies? You know, but she was reading, like, everything the wrong way because she was still and wasn't communicating clearly. Upset about my playing the role in that, like, escape room a little too seriously, and didn't say it until I'd already been eating her for a while. It's like the date was already kind of ruined. This was all one of the last people I dated before the pandemic struck. The last, actually. Before the pandemic struck, I dated a couple people a little in the pandemic. Didn't work out great. Did more. I did some people early when I had long COVID. There was a period after the initial, like, 6 months where I was doing a little better for a while, and also I wasn't as, like, the living situation I was in hadn't become, like, really abusive yet, because it got worse longer, and I was feeling a little more optimistic with life because my symptoms improved a little bit, and hadn't yet gotten reinfected and realized I would lose a whole bunch of, like, a year of recovery the first time I got reinfected, and a year second time. COVID, but because that happens with long COVID. But anyways, dated a couple girls then, and then there's been like 2-3 years since I've been on a real date now. Because in the last 2 years, the living situation became abusive, and I was just way too stressed out, and it was bleeding into my interactions on dating apps, and I didn't realize I was just sounding really stressed all the time, and people were picking up on it. I was stuck in an abusive living situation. And I had very low energy, so sometimes I would take a long time to reply because, you know, my long COVID. So some people would just get upset because they'd have to wait a few days to hear back from me sometimes if I was having a really bad day, and I was having more of those with the additional stress in my living situation. A really bad day with my disease. Yeah, I've had more luck a little bit with that since I got out of that situation, but I don't have much time for it because, you know, trying to work stuff out with government offices, trying to find employers who might make the necessary disability accommodations. Because I'm probably the healthiest I've been since I got long COVID now. Because there is a very slow recovery. And as long as I don't get reinfected, and I think my last reinfection was more than a year ago, from a year and a half, yeah. So, if I get reinfected again, I'll lose most of my progress for the last year and a half. But for the moment, I'm at a high point in my health, and enough that I can consider a little part-time work, even though it's not enough to survive off. And out of the abusive living situation, my savings haven't yet depleted, so done a little on the dating apps, but for my own sanity, because the prospect of being alone forever, and you know, it's not great, and it's hard to even make friends with when you're not working, because one way people make friends is work. And honestly, a lot of people, they get older and they like have kids and they stop having social lives, which is a mistake. So a lot of people my age aren't socializing because they have kids now. So it's hard to make friends the same age. And it's not always easy to find common ground. People who are a lot older or younger than you. And it's an awkward time. So dating apps with some of the people who still not married at my age, though a lot of them, some of them it's because they have issues, and some of them it's because they're looking so hard for the right person, and they're always inquiring why I haven't married. It's like, why haven't you married? I'm not going to ask that because people take it the wrong way, but it's like, there's a dual standard. Men are expected to share a lot about themselves, but if they share too much, then there's, oh, you shared too much. But I'm being grilled for information. Meanwhile, I can't ask anything without it. It's like, women can be intensely private on these things. Yeah, I'd like to know, because a lot of times the last few times I was dating, like even when the I go on a date with someone, it turns out that they've been like engaged 2 times before, and even though they're never married, like, that's kind of important to know about someone. You know? But I can't ask questions like that without... There's a double standard. The power in dating in the early phases is with the woman, and that shifts, actually. I'm not saying women have all the advantages. No, in the beginning, they have the upper hand, and then usually the power dynamic shifts towards men having the upper hand in relationships over time. Because we have a very patriarchal society that still hasn't put away its stupid, outdated gender norms. And this is how patriarchy does it. It gives women the upper hand at the very beginning, but then has them slowly give away power in relationships and sometimes autonomy if the guy is controlling. Until, you know, by the time of marriage, it's fucked up. Don't neck it. We need to be more progressive with gender relations. But, anyways. I won't even be able to think about this stuff much longer. As I get closer, my savings running out. Probably discover the levels of fuckery the Social Security Administration people are willing to go to block my getting help. If not the local Social Security office, which is good and probably won't screw with me. The other one will probably try and refuse to give up my case, even though they're not supposed to be handling it anymore. And the people are contracted out, the for-profit company, like people at those places will fuck with me. Find out the deaths they'll sink to hurt someone who doesn't deserve it. Just because they can, because they're power-mad pricks. And because the system wants them to do it. Like, so that, you know, people don't get benefits so that billionaires can pay lower taxes, basically. So it encourages this kind of behavior and tries to hire people who will tend towards it. There's some good people in government, but there are also some really nasty ones. And it's partly the job corrupts them, but it's a whole lot that those people get drawn into these jobs. In the hiring and retention, the good people get driven out, and the shitty people find like souls and help drive out the good people, work together to do so sometimes. I'm sure. It's usually when you have a job that has a lot of shitty people, it's usually a combination of who goes into that job, who stays in that job, and whether the system encourages or discourages certain behavior. This is why the police are so fucked up. Really good people go into the police force sometimes, but they end up leaving or getting driven out or being corrupted because there's no room in the system for them to remain good people. Same with certain types of bureaucratic agencies. Good people go in, but good people go out rather than stay. Sometimes people leave when they shouldn't. I'm not a fan of all these people. I'm going to resign because I don't like the things I'm being asked to do. No. Sometimes the best thing you can do is stay in place or refuse to follow things that are against your conscience and make them fire you instead of leaving. I know that might not be the best for your career, but like I wish more people, instead of resigning from like Trump's administration, would just work to resist him, for instance. And from state governments that are he's commander's control and stuff, like stay and resist. I know that's hard, and it may be better if they leave than be corrupted and give in, but it would be better still if they stayed put and resisted, works on the sly to stop the bad things from happening. Anyways. Yeah. You know, like, and you can see some of this, like when I was roommate with this police chief's son, I could see he didn't clearly understand how things were changing in the police forces and how it was getting worse and police brutality was on the rise, and how even some of the attitudes he had were toxic and could lead to bad behavior if he was a cop. Like, maybe his dad wasn't the hero he thought he was. I was never going to tell that to this guy to his face, but yeah, even some of the stuff he shared indicated that maybe, you know, he harassed his father because it was his father, but it wasn't based on an unbiased, you know, dad had probably done some pretty bad stuff and he didn't realize it. Anyways. He was perfectly aware of it, but he couldn't really face it, is what I'm saying. Because, you know, wouldn't have gotten hints of these things or the signs, or even sometimes mentioning directly if he wasn't aware, but on some part of his brain was unwilling to face the truth. Nice guy himself, though, the roommate. He wasn't a cop, his dad was. Yeah, there's a tendency to be loyal to parents, even when they're shitty people. Too often I've defended people I'm related to who have done horrible things to me just because I'm related to them. Like, counselor I've seen his comment on this. It's like, well, part of that's because I'm religious and, you know, turn the other cheek and such. And part of it is because I don't see the point, and you got to be careful not to think people as pure good and evil. You can defend them because you still think there's some good in that person. It doesn't mean you want to be around them. It doesn't mean they can be redeemed. It's just keep a realistic view that all people are checkered with good and evil. Some people are much more good than evil, and some are much more evil than good. But very few people are purely one thing or the other in this world. We all do bad things and good things sometimes. I guess I just want to see the good, especially people aren't related to see the few good things they do, or the things that there are mitigating or factors or excuses for some of the things they've done. Do that, and at the same time take appropriate actions where they're within my power. I didn't stay in an abusive situation, housing-wise, because with the family I was staying with, because I was in denial about what they were doing. I stayed there because I had no choice, because I could not leave and know I would keep housing over my head and may end up homeless because I end up having to leave in the end anyways. Like, if I left earlier, I probably would have been even greater risk. At least now, There's more understanding that their disease, long COVID, probably face fewer obstacles getting help than the past when few people were even aware the disease existed. I bought as much time as I could, knowing it couldn't work out forever. Hoping there'd be a cure for the disease, but not yet. We're not even close. Anyways. Hope you folks enjoyed this video. Do like, subscribe. Sorry if it's a little bit of a downer. I can be a downer when I'm suffering from really bad post-exertion malaise. When everything hurts and my brain doesn't work right. And I feel like I'm thinking through a fog and swimming through a soup. I can be a little bit of a downer right now, so I apologize, but do like, subscribe, comment, because I need this channel to get to where I can monetize it to earn some income, so I hopefully don't end up homeless, especially if we can end up supplementing SSI someday. It might be enough. Anyways, I wish you all the best. Take care of each other, be kind to yourselves, and may you always find a guiding star to lead you home. Until next time, it's Northstar, I do, and best luck.